Welcome, bestie. So, I've already finished this video this morning, but I then finished a book like an hour ago, and I was like, ooh, I kind of want to refill and do it again with the new book that I read. It doesn't exactly change anything, just a couple of stuff, but I don't know. I thought it'd be kind of fun, and so instead of doing like the big setup I did earlier, I didn't do a big setup, but it was just different. I'm gonna do another kind of like lazy in my bed, like a sleepover. This is actually like a tag video, so it's almost like BuzzFeed quiz era sleepover energy that we're getting here. So starting off, this is gonna be the quarter year crisis tag, and I saw this because of stalking Kafka's video from this morning. I think it was this morning. It might have been yesterday, and she kind of tagged herself, and this is originally from Roisin Reads, from her tag, uh, which is yeah, like the quarter year tag. Alrighty, so without anything else, I'm gonna be referencing my story graph and my Goodreads, even though objectively, the information is on both of them. Okay. So, oh, actually, no. I don't keep track of like my day-to-day reading stuff on Storygraph. Like I just plug in the books once I've read them. So I have like some stuff on Goodreads I don't have on Storygraph. But to begin with, how many books have I read thus far in 2023? I have read 18 books. My goal for this year is 45 books, which is less than my goal last year, but my page goal is up from 15K to 20K. And even though some of these books were audiobooks, I don't really care. It's just whatever. I just still count them as books. I don't care. Like if you care, I'm sorry, but I do not care. So roughly, that's I've read around like 4,400 pages. So I still have like 18K, no, not 18K, 1,800 to catch up. And I'm also ahead by 4 books in my like book numbers goal. Have you already found a book that you think might be a 2023 favorite? If not, what was your favorite book you read that wasn't quite 5 stars? I mentioned before, I think stars is like a weird way to rank a book because something might be not 5 stars because of plot reasons or the writing wasn't amazing, but it still sticks with you. And I feel like there is an it factor in books that sometimes is completely arbitrary, and it's really hard to recommend someone like, oh, I just loved this book, and then they ask why, and you're like, yeah, that was a good book. Like, I don't know. So I'm like, I don't know. It's not even relevant to me because I do have books that I already think are going to be 2023 favorites. One of them is A Wife for My Son by Ali Galam. It is about a young girl who, in an arranged marriage, goes to live with her husband's family. There's an age gap between her and her husband, and she has to kind of navigate not only the politics of a new family, but also her sense as a modern woman who has her own desires in comparison with her family who has more traditional values, who also, like, credit to that family, like, for example, like the mother-in-law has lived by the traditions that she herself is now enforcing. So it's not like they come out of nowhere. Like she's also saying, my life is fine. Are you saying my life is bad by kind of turning your back to the life I'm trying to provide for my family? It's, I think, really fabulously written, and the characters are so developed and so nuanced, and the relationships just feel really realistic. Like there's a scene of female friendship, and I just love that because I think you don't get that often in books that talk about these topics. You don't get the inclusion of, you know, inter women relationships, and yet they existed there and they were really wonderful. Um, yeah, such a good book. I also read They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib, and that book is so fabulous. His writing is just like mind-blowingly beautiful and poignant, and so that definitely is going to be a favorite and a recommendation for everyone. Any one-star books / least favorite books of the year. So I have two that are not 1 star, but are my least favorite so far. First off is We by Evgenia Zamyatin. This is it's basically like 1984 before 1984, like almost disturbingly so. Um, it's not that it's a bad book. I think I would definitely reread this book at another time in my life where I could appreciate it more. I just think that it's a lot of sci-fi world building that you have to be into. You have to get into it. And I've just not been in the position where I can sit down and read a book from cover to cover like that and be fully immersed in this world. And so every time I go back to it, I feel like further and further away, more and more confused. And in general, it's a very I don't know. Like you know how there's that like woman unhinged trope. I feel there needs to be something for like man meets woman and slowly unravel. Maybe there is that word. If you guys know that word, let me know. What is it? Man meets woman, slowly unravels and becomes increasingly hysterical. Man unhinged, but specifically caused by a woman. That is this book. In addition to being a dystopian novel. Um, so yeah, like I'll give it another go. It feels like it's somehow important literature. It's like criticism of the totalitarianism communist state by someone who had like watched it grow. Yeah. The other book that I had not, excuse you, the other book that I had read and not quite enjoyed was Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is so weird because my feelings about this, like I kind of reflect on why I don't like the book. And first of all, I'm not a big fan of the narrator. I'm listening to an audiobook from Libby. The lady, she has a very jaunty voice. I think a jaunty voice is fine. I just think the fact that this is also a book, you know, taking place in like the 1930s, 40s, right? It extra kind of worsens that. And then the way the book itself is written, it's so. Radium Girls is about the girls working in the like for Radium Core or something, and they were painting the dials on watch faces with radium paint so it would glow in the dark. So they would like lick the paint brushes to get really fine details, and a lot of them ended up becoming really ill with like, you know, exposure to radioactive material. And it's really horrible what happens to them. There's a lot of like body stuff in it. Uh, and I think the reason why this book is very frustrating to me is because it has many, many, many girls who are brought up, which is fine. Many girls were affected by this. But then it goes in, and for all of these girls, it's giving you like, she was a pretty round faced girl with X hobby, and she really wanted to go to the dance with Jimmy, and then Jimmy and this and that, and like all of this stuff. And it's like, oh, she just couldn't wait to be a mother. She's gonna be a mother soon. Her mother, like, and it's fine, right? Like, I respect that this book is trying to humanize these girls, but I think by having so many girls that it attempts to humanize, it in fact makes them all kind of blend together, especially because many of these women were like, you know, working class girls in that time period. It kind of serves to just almost like erase them because, you know, the opportunities for women were quite rare in that time. So you end up talking about women who like want to marry and want to have kids and want to like, you know, do all that really traditional stuff over and over and over again. And also, like, I'm coming at this book mostly from an interest of maybe some of the science of what was happening to these girls, like the medical science, right? And then also some of the workers' rights concerns and views about corporations. Like, that's where my interest in this book is. And not that I don't want to hear these girls' stories, but I think at some point you actually lose the value um, in telling the story by, I don't know, going so in depth on these really like not I don't want to say trivial aspects of these girls' lives. It was very important to them, I'm sure, but like, you know, when you start talking about a girl and you're like, oh, she loved fashion, she was a fashion girly, and then like in 3 sentences you're going to be talking about how her jaw was falling off, but at the same time you've done it about every other girl, so this girl almost fades into obscurity by that fact. Like, I don't know. I think that's sort of my problem. And I'm currently listening to Hate in the Homeland. I forget by who. And that book, I would say, almost has the opposite problem. There's not enough of these, you know, personal anecdotes. And so I think this, you know, this book definitely taught me there's a balance, that too much humanizing can actually have an opposite effect. that you're trying to get along. Okie dokes. Most read genre so far. It's definitely going to be literary fiction. I'm telling you that right now. I'm a literary girl. So, mostly literary fiction always. But currently, I have like a 55-45 split between fiction and nonfiction, which, if last year was any indication, it'll probably end up being a 75-35 split. Okay, a book that has surprised me. Definitely A Son for My Wife surprised me, because I feel like there was a lot in that book that I expected to be maybe a bit more old fashioned. Like, I didn't expect the perspective to be as in line with my own perspective. The way certain things are described, I'm like, oh, I could see my contemporaries writing this book from this viewpoint. And I think it kind of reminded me, you know, just because we just because you're hearing something does not mean it's the first time it's ever been discussed. In a different vein, but a similar example, I think, is how I know Ron DeSantis has ruined the word woke forever, but, being woke, right, that concept, it has gained popularity, like very mainstream popularity within the last 5 years, but in reality that was a word and an idea that had existed within Black communities for, I think, like almost a century or something, like a very long time. And it was, I think, coming back maybe like, I don't know if it was Harlem Renaissance or if it was like Jim Crow era, definitely probably an amalgamation of the two, of like stay woke, be vigilant for systemic subtle racism and microaggressions that are still capable of hurting you. If I hope I'm understanding that correctly. But so that idea of staying woke has existed for a long time, and all of a sudden it becomes popularized in the cultural consciousness, and it feels like this new thing when it has actually existed. And that kind of, not more radical, because it's not radical to think that those problems exist in a country like the US. It's like it's but in kind of like presenting it as this new thing, how it's being presented in that way, it seems more radical than it really is, where it's like very normal and very normalized, especially in the communities affected. I hope I didn't just blabber on. I hope people got what I was saying. Okay. Next question is a book that's come out in 2023 already that you want to read but haven't yet. I'm not a big tracker of like new releases. It usually just happens that I'll see, an author that I like, that they've had a release, but I don't necessarily like run to grab that book immediately. The one book I can kind of think that maybe falls into this, but I don't even think it's out yet. um, but it is Jimi Hendrix Live in Lviv by Andrei Kurkov. That book is coming out, I think, in May, and I don't know, that might be only Europe. It might be coming out in the US in January of next year. Uh, so I have a family member going to Copenhagen. I might ask them to grab me a copy in that case. Okay, one goal you made that you're succeeding at. I am currently succeeding, I think, at reading more Eastern European books, Time Shelter being one of them that I finished. I've also finished a book by Marsha Gessen, The Future is History. And then in terms of currently reading, I have We and Dead Souls by Gogol that I'm currently reading. So yeah, feel very proud of myself for that. And I'm kind of interested in seeing different ways in which reading more from, Eastern Europe, what things I'll start to notice, kind of common threads throughout different books. One goal you made you need to focus more on, uh, reading big books. So I've read 18 books so far this year, but so many of them are teeny tiny little things. Like if I go to my story graph, it has like the page numbers. Almost 70% of the books are less than 300 pages. Like Ebola 76, tiny. The Diving Pool, tiny. Brickmakers, tiny. Wife for My Son wasn't that small. 3 Cups of Deceit, teeny, teeny, tiny. Three Blind Mice and Other Stories, short stories, tiny, by Agatha Christie. The Whole, tiny. All these tiny little books. And my goal is to read kind of longer books this year to get more in that habit. And so I really need to focus on that. Yeah. Okay, and then any new to me booktubers, bookstagrammers, booktalkers that I would recommend. I'm not I'm new. I feel, first of all, I don't go on books. I don't go on Instagram at all. Book Talk, somehow I go on more than Instagram, but I don't go on, not even Book Talk, TikTok. I don't go on at all. Actually, a lot of the TikTok content I get about books, I get from Pinterest. Just very funny to me. So like booktubers that are new to me, I'll leave a list in my description of all of like my favorite booktubers thus far. It's not going to be an exhaustive list, but it's going to be the ones that like I really enjoy. Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm not. I don't know. I really respect including this. In this list, especially for like larger creators, but it's like I feel like everyone who's found my channel has definitely found every booktuber that I like's channel. Like I think we're kind of probably all in the same circle, and I'm like very small in that circle, which I have no problem with at all. Um, but yeah, so that is the end of the tag. Those were all very fun and good questions. And I'm going to finish out, sorry, I'm wearing my little pajama pants. I'm going to finish out this video by talking about my currently reading books. I mentioned in my March reading wrap up that March was a month of starting books, but not necessarily finishing them. And so I have a lot of stuff on my list. Some started actually before March that I just want to kind of get through. I want to kind of get onto a blank slate so I can pick out some of these larger books and just really focus and let them marinate inside of me. That sounds horrible. So to begin with, on my currently reading pile, we have We by Evgenia Zamyatin, as I've already mentioned. I'm on page 179, and yeah, it ends on like 250 something. So not a lot left, but like I said, just very difficult to get into. I also have Asa Akira, Insatiable, a porn love story. So this is about a adult film actress, and I guess it's like her memoirs. I also love this cover. It's by David Choi, I believe. Yeah, by David Choi. I actually have like a little book of postcards that I got many, many, many years ago, and the cover is very beautiful. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting book. She still works in the industry, so I question the I don't know, I don't want to question someone's integrity, but like if you're still making money from this, you can't release a book and be like, oh, actually, here's all the terrible things about the industry that I work in. Like, that's not going to bode well. So I'm kind of curious to see how honest of a book this feels once I finish it. Then we have Dead Souls, as mentioned. I am not very far into this at all, literally page 25. And I've mentioned in this book that there is a character who is always on page 14 of a book, so I definitely can't have Goldwood seeing me like that. We're going to finish you for sure. And then one of my mammoth books that I have on my list, I have actually started reading this one, and this is going to be my first of the mammoth books that I'm focusing on. Yeah, and it was pretty interesting. I'm trying to see all the bookmarks that I left in these. This one's from Riffraff. So yeah, this is actually like a really interesting book. As far like it was interesting to read. Like, not that the content isn't interesting. It's like a samurai book, but more or less like it was a good book as I was reading it. It's just I got a little distracted, and that's not what I want to do with my big books. And so yeah, this will be like the first of my big books that I think I focus on. But also there's so many over there that I want to work on. So I guess I'll have to really get through this quickly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, if you want to give any answers to these tags, please do. This was really fun, and I'm really glad I saw that video this morning. Yeah, let me know if your goals are going well, what you've been reading, and what you recommend from this year so far. I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.